In the hushed silence of Memorial Hospital's intensive care unit, Mike Wilson guided his sleepy 7-year-old daughter past the nurse's station at 2 in the morning. The night janitor shouldn't have brought his child to work, but tonight, he had no choice. Emily's regular babysitter had called in sick, and Mike couldn't afford to miss a shift. He whispered gentle reminders to stay quiet as they moved through the sterile corridor, the child's innocent eyes wide with curiosity at this forbidden adult world of illness and healing. Neither of them could have known that the unconscious woman in room 312 was Victoria Hayes, the formidable CEO whose life was about to become intertwined with theirs in ways none could imagine. The machines monitoring her vital signs beeped steadily in the darkness, counting heartbeats that gave no hint of the brilliant mind, temporarily silenced by trauma. In the harsh fluorescent light of Chicago's Memorial Hospital, Mike Wilson moved like a shadow. At 38, his small frame and prematurely graying brown hair made him nearly invisible to the doctors and nurses who hurried past. 5 years ago, he had been a promising medical student with dreams of becoming a surgeon. Now, he silently pushed his cleaning cart through the midnight corridors, grateful for the night shift that allowed him to care for his daughter Emily during the day. His wife Sarah's cancer had taken everything, their savings, their plans, and finally, her life, leaving Mike to raise their daughter alone. He'd abandoned medical school 3 semesters short of graduation, trading stethoscopes and textbooks for mops and disinfectant. Yet he still carried his medical knowledge with him, often spending his breaks reading journals and studies online, keeping the embers of his old dream alive, if only as a private comfort. He'd developed a reputation among the night nurses as the janitor who could troubleshoot medical equipment with unexpected skill, though most of the day staff remained oblivious to his capabilities. The modest apartment they called home in Chicago's South Side was filled with Emily's artwork and small science projects they built together on weekends. Though the paint was peeling, and the furniture second-hand, Mike had created a haven of curiosity and learning for his daughter, determined that she would have opportunities he had lost. His supervisor, Richards, often complained about Mike's slow pace, unaware that the delay came from quiet conversations with lonely patients who appreciated a kind word in the middle of the night. Despite the exhaustion of working 2 jobs, hospital janitor by night and neighborhood handyman by day, Mike never missed Emily's school performances, his weathered face lighting up with pride as she sang or recited poetry with a confidence that reminded him painfully of her mother. Victoria Hayes strode through the executive floor of FutureTech's glass tower, with the confidence of someone who had fought for every inch of her success. At 36, she was one of the youngest CEOs in the medical technology industry, renowned for her analytical mind and unflinching decisiveness. Her dark hair was always perfectly styled, her tailored suits impeccable, her brown eyes missing nothing. Under her leadership, FutureTech had developed groundbreaking monitoring devices, with their latest innovation, the Health Pulse, poised to revolutionize cardiac care. Board members who had initially questioned her promotion at such a young age now deferred to her judgment, watching their investments multiply under her strategic vision. Victoria's personal life was as ordered and sparse as her minimalist corner office. Divorced after a brief marriage in her 20s, she'd chosen the clarity of spreadsheets over the messiness of relationships. Her childhood had been fractured by her parents' bitter divorce, leaving her with a determination to need no one and to prove her worth through achievement alone. The emptiness of her downtown penthouse bothered her only in rare moments of weakness, quickly dismissed with another project, another goal, another late night at the office. Her assistant knew to schedule even her social events with military precision. Charity galas where she networked rather than enjoyed herself. Cultural events attended for optics rather than pleasure. When she visited Memorial Hospital to negotiate the testing of FutureTech's devices, Victoria moved through the corridors like royalty, barely noticing the staff who maintained the world around her prestigious meetings. The janitors, cafeteria workers, and maintenance personnel registered in her awareness only when they created obstacles to her efficiency. A recently mopped floor, requiring a detour, a delayed elevator, a cart blocking her path. Their first collision came on a Tuesday evening. Victoria was reviewing the Health Pulse trial data with the hospital's chief of cardiology when Mike entered the conference room to empty the trash bins. As he moved quietly along the wall, his cart bumped an electrical outlet, causing a momentary flicker in the lights. Perhaps, Victoria said, without looking up, the hospital should consider better training for support staff. The comment wasn't directed at Mike, but at the hospital administrator, who nodded nervously. The cardiology chief, Dr. Brennan, glanced sympathetically at Mike, but remained silent, unwilling to challenge the powerful CEO whose technology grant could fund his department for years. Mike kept his eyes down, face burning with familiar shame. He'd grown accustomed to being discussed as if he weren't present, as if his blue uniform rendered him somehow less than human. Once, Such dismissals would have provoked anger, but years of financial struggle had taught him to swallow his pride. As he turned to leave, Emily appeared in the doorway, having wandered from the break room where she'd been drawing while waiting for her father's shift to end. "Daddy, I finished my homework," she announced proudly, holding up a math worksheet. Mike moved quickly to usher her out, mumbling apologies, but Emily, with a child's lack of social fear, walked straight to Victoria's chair. "You look sad," she observed, offering a crayon drawing of a red heart with the words, "Don't be sad" written in crooked letters. Victoria froze, unsure how to respond to this small intrusion into her carefully controlled world. For a split second, her professional mask slipped, revealing something vulnerable beneath. Then she accepted the drawing with a stiff "thank you" before turning back to her presentation. But as Mike led Emily away, Victoria found herself looking directly at him for the first time, noticing the intelligence in his blue eyes and the gentle way he spoke to his daughter. 2 months later, FutureTech faced its first major crisis with the Health Pulse device. During clinical trials at Memorial Hospital, the monitors repeatedly triggered false alarms, disrupting hospital operations and endangering patient care by creating alarm fatigue among the staff. The technical issues emerged primarily during night shifts, when Victoria wasn't present to observe them firsthand. Her engineering team struggled to replicate the problem in their laboratory, creating a growing tension between FutureTech and the hospital administration. If not resolved quickly, the company stood to lose millions in development costs and suffer irreparable damage to its reputation. Victoria's board was growing impatient, with several members suggesting they cut their losses and pivot to a different product line. Determined to salvage both the device and her professional reputation, Victoria called an emergency meeting with her engineering team and hospital representatives, the tension palpable as they argued over the source of the problem. "It must be a software issue," insisted the lead engineer, James Phillips, a Stanford graduate, whose defensiveness grew with each failed solution. "The hardware was extensively tested in lab conditions." "Well, it's failing in real conditions," countered the hospital's chief of medicine, Dr. Eleanor Reeves, who had initially championed the trial but now feared for her own credibility. "We can't use unreliable equipment on cardiac patients." Victoria rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of investor expectations pressing down. Through the partially open door, Mike was mopping the hallway, overhearing the heated debate. Something about the engineer's description of the problem triggered a memory from his medical studies, a paper on electromagnetic interference with medical devices. He hesitated, knowing his place in the hospital hierarchy, but concern for patient safety finally outweighed his reservations. As the meeting broke up with no resolution, Victoria gathered her files in the empty conference room. Mike knocked softly on the open door. "Excuse me, Miss Hayes," he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I couldn't help overhearing about the Health Pulse issues." Victoria looked up, irritation flashing across her face. The strain of the failing trials showed in the tightness around her eyes, the slight dishevelment of her usually immaculate appearance. "We're handling it," she said dismissively. "I appreciate your concern, but I think it might be electromagnetic interference from the hospital's new LED lighting system," Mike continued, stepping forward. "They operate at a frequency that could potentially disrupt your sensors." Victoria's eyebrows rose. "And you know this because?" "I studied medicine before." Mike gestured vaguely at his janitor's uniform, the gulf between his past aspirations and present reality momentarily overwhelming. He pushed through the discomfort, focusing on the technical problem rather than his personal circumstances. "I've kept up with research. The pattern you described, false alarms only in certain rooms, matches the areas where the new lighting was installed last month." One of Victoria's engineers entered, immediately scoffing. "Victoria, you're not seriously taking technical advice from the cleaning staff, are you?" The engineer, James Phillips, looked at Mike with undisguised contempt, his posture radiating the confidence of someone who had never questioned his place in the professional hierarchy. Victoria hesitated, her gaze moving between the smirking engineer and Mike's earnest expression. Something in Mike's quiet certainty gave her pause, making her wonder if her company's culture of credentialism might be blinding them to valuable insights. "Thank you for your input," she finally said, neither accepting nor dismissing his theory. "We'll consider all possibilities." As Mike returned to his cart, he felt Victoria's eyes following him, her expression unreadable. The situation escalated when a patient nearly received incorrect treatment due to a false alarm from the Health Pulse. An elderly man with a complex cardiac history was almost administered an unnecessary medication that could have caused dangerous side effects. The night nurse, fortunately, had double-checked the readings with a traditional monitor before proceeding. Hospital administration threatened to terminate the contract, sending Victoria into crisis mode. Her usual problem-solving approach, throwing more engineers and more money at the issue, wasn't yielding results. For the first time in her career, Victoria found herself facing a technical problem that threatened to derail everything she had built. Desperate for a solution, she returned to the hospital after hours, hoping to observe the false alarms firsthand. Working late one night at the hospital, she paused outside a patient's room, hearing a familiar voice explaining something about medication delivery systems. Peering in, she saw Mike helping a nurse troubleshoot an IV pump, his hands moving with unexpected confidence as he explained the mechanics of the device. "See, the occlusion alarm keeps triggering because the sensor threshold is too sensitive for the new tubing," he was saying, adjusting something inside the machine with practiced ease. The manufacturer updated the tubing material but forgot to update the sensor calibration in the firmware. The nurse nodded gratefully. "I swear, Mike, you understand these machines better than the texts they send from the company." Victoria lingered, unnoticed. Watching this man she had dismissed perform a task that required both technical knowledge and medical understanding. There was a quiet authority in his demeanor that she had completely missed before, obscured by her own preconceptions about his role. Later that night, after another failed meeting with her team, Victoria found Mike in the employee break room, helping Emily with her science homework. The little girl was building a simple circuit with batteries and LEDs, her face scrunched in concentration as Mike patiently explained the flow of electricity. The tableau struck Victoria, the contrast between this thoughtful teaching moment and the chaos of her own technical crisis. "Mr. Wilson," she said, causing both to look up in surprise. "I'd like to hear more about your electromagnetic interference theory." Mike's explanation was clear and jargon-free, sketching diagrams on Emily's notebook to illustrate the concept of wave interference. He described how certain frequencies could create destructive patterns when overlapping, using the analogy of ripples in water to make the complex physics accessible. Victoria found herself nodding, understanding concepts that her engineers had made unnecessarily complicated. While Emily beamed with pride at her father, Mike outlined a simple test that could confirm his hypothesis without expensive equipment. "The false alarms should disappear if you temporarily disable the LED lighting in one test room and revert to the old incandescent bulbs," he suggested. "If I'm right, that would give you immediate confirmation before investing in a more permanent solution." "My dad knows lots of things," the little girl told Victoria earnestly, her small hand resting protectively on her father's arm. "When I get sick, he always knows what to do before the doctor even says it." The child's absolute faith in her father was touching, and Victoria realized she was seeing Mike through completely different eyes, not as an invisible service worker but as a man of substance and depth. Victoria found herself smiling at Emily, then meeting Mike's eyes with new respect. "We'd like to test your theory. Could you join a meeting tomorrow?" As Mike nodded, Victoria realized she was noticing things she'd overlooked before. The intelligence behind his eyes, the quiet dignity in his bearing, and most surprisingly, the warmth that spread through her chest when he smiled. The next day, Mike stood before a room of skeptical engineers and executives, wearing his best shirt, still visibly worn at the collar, as he explained his theory about the electromagnetic interference from the hospital's new lighting system. He drew diagrams on the whiteboard, showing how the operating frequency of the LED lights could create interference patterns with the health pulse sensors. "It's not that either system is failing," he explained. "They're both working as designed, but they're accidentally talking to each other in ways the engineers couldn't have anticipated." Initially met with crossed arms and raised eyebrows, Mike's clear, accessible explanation gradually won over the room. He even suggested a simple solution. Either adjust the frequency of the health pulse sensors, or add electromagnetic shielding, both far less expensive than redesigning the entire device. Victoria watched with growing admiration as Mike fielded complex questions without pretension, translating technical concepts into practical examples that everyone could understand. When tests confirmed his theory, the atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically. Engineers who had dismissed him minutes earlier now crowded around, asking his opinion on implementation strategies. After the meeting, Victoria invited Mike to her office at FutureTech headquarters, a sleek, minimalist space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. "I owe you an apology," she said directly, dispensing with corporate niceties. "I should have listened to you sooner. Your insight may have saved us millions in development costs." Mike smiled slightly. "People often forget that knowledge can come from unexpected places." Victoria nodded thoughtfully. "That's precisely why I'd like to offer you a position as a technical advisor on our development team. We need your perspective, both medical and practical." Mike's surprise was evident. I don't have the right qualifications. I never finished medical school, and my knowledge isn't. But it's real-world and multidimensional," Victoria interrupted. "We have plenty of PhDs. What we need is someone who understands how these devices interact with actual hospital environments and real people." Their conversation was interrupted by a call from Emily's school. She had developed a fever and needed to be picked up immediately. Mike apologized for the abrupt end to their meeting, and to his surprise, Victoria offered to drive him to the school. In her sleek BMW, a strange intimacy developed as Mike shared his history, his dream of becoming a doctor, his wife's illness, and his decision to prioritize family over career. Victoria, usually guarded about her personal life, found herself reciprocating, speaking of her childhood with emotionally distant parents and how achievement had become her shield against vulnerability. At the school, Victoria watched Mike interact with his daughter, his gentle competence as he assessed her fever, the inside jokes they shared, the absolute trust in Emily's eyes as she looked at her father. When Emily, despite her fever, proudly invited Victoria to see her shell collection at home, Victoria surprised herself by accepting. The Wilson apartment was small but warmly cluttered with books, art projects, and evidence of a life rich in creativity, if not in material possessions. Victoria noticed a corner desk stacked with medical journals and notebooks filled with Mike's careful handwriting, evidence of a mind that had never stopped learning despite leaving formal education behind. While Mike prepared medicine for Emily, the little girl showed Victoria her treasured shells, explaining each one's origin. "Dad says the ocean is like life, sometimes rough but always beautiful," Emily said, looking up at Victoria with feverish brightness. "Do you think that's true? You look sad like my mom in her pictures." The innocent observation pierced Victoria's carefully constructed facade, leaving her momentarily speechless. That evening, after Emily fell asleep, Mike and Victoria sat on the small balcony of his apartment, the city lights spread before them like fallen stars. Mike accepted Victoria's job offer, with the condition that his schedule would accommodate Emily's needs. As Victoria prepared to leave, Emily called out, asking for a song. Victoria hesitated, then sat beside the feverish child, and softly sang a lullaby her own mother had sung long ago, a memory she hadn't realized she still carried. Mike stood in the doorway, watching this unexpected moment of tenderness from a woman known for her steely resolve. Something shifted between them that night, a recognition of shared humanity beneath their different circumstances. As Victoria drove home to her empty penthouse, she realized she was smiling, the weight of perpetual control temporarily lifted from her shoulders. Meanwhile, Mike sat beside his sleeping daughter, wondering at the strange turn his life had taken, and trying to ignore the unfamiliar warmth that thoughts of Victoria now inspired. 1 month later, FutureTech prepared for a crucial investor presentation on the improved health pulse. Mike, now officially a technical advisor, had helped develop a key innovation, an algorithm that could identify and filter electromagnetic interference, along with design modifications optimized for real hospital environments. His practical insights had transformed the product, making it more robust in real-world conditions without sacrificing sensitivity. The engineering team, initially resistant to an outsider's input, had gradually come to respect Mike's practical knowledge, though James Phillips remained coldly professional, clearly viewing Mike's rise as a threat to his own standing. For Mike, the transition had been both exhilarating and disorienting. Trading his mop for a company laptop, his janitor's uniform for business-casual attire that still felt foreign against his skin. He continued his night shifts at the hospital, unwilling to abandon financial security, until he was certain of his new path. Minutes before the presentation, disaster struck when the demonstration unit malfunctioned. Victoria and her technical team frantically searched for the problem while investors waited in the conference room, their murmured conversations growing louder as the delay extended. The company's chief financial officer was already preparing damage control, aware that any sign of technical failure could send stock prices tumbling. Victoria, normally unflappable, felt panic rising as solution after solution failed. Mike, observing their debugging attempts from the periphery of the group, noticed something everyone else had missed. The demo is set up for ideal conditions, not real-world ones with multiple devices operating simultaneously, he said quietly to Victoria. Your conference room has 6 different wireless systems running that weren't present during development testing. With time running out, Victoria made a bold decision. Mike, can you present this section instead of our technical director? You understand the real-world applications better than anyone. Mike paled. I've never presented to investors before. I don't have the right vocabulary or... That's exactly what we need, Victoria insisted, her hand briefly touching his arm. Authenticity, not jargon. Talk to them the way you explained it to me, simple but profound. The presentation began with Victoria outlining the company vision. When it came to the technical portion, she introduced Mike with unexpected words. Our next expert doesn't have degrees from MIT or Stanford, but he possesses something more valuable: real-world understanding of how technology interacts with human lives and medical environments. There was a subtle ripple of surprise through the audience. Investors accustomed to credentialed experts in expensive suits, now facing a man whose humbler origins were evident despite his new clothes. Mike approached the podium in the new suit Victoria had helped him select. Initially nervous, but growing confident as he spoke about practical hospital challenges and how the improved health pulse addressed them. His hands, still bearing calluses from years of physical labor, gestured expressively as he described the reality of medical environments that engineers in sterile labs often failed to consider: the electromagnetic noise from multiple devices, the physical obstacles that affected signal strength, the harried medical staff who needed intuitive interfaces rather than technical complexity. He avoided technical terminology, instead using everyday language and concrete examples from his hospital experience. When a nurse is trying to stabilize a patient at 3 in the morning, he explained, every false alarm isn't just an inconvenience, it's a distraction that could cost someone their life. Our improved system recognizes patterns that distinguish real emergencies from background noise, just like experienced medical professionals learn to do. Mike shared a story about an elderly patient who had nearly received incorrect medication due to a false alarm, his voice conveying the human stakes beyond profit margins and market share. This isn't just a device, he concluded. It's a bridge between technology and humanity at the moments when people are most vulnerable, when they're sick, afraid, and need reliable care. The investor response exceeded all expectations. They appreciated the practical, human-centered approach, with one major investor commenting, "For the first time, I truly understand how this technology works and why it matters." After the successful presentation, Victoria hosted a small celebration. She formally introduced Mike to the leadership team not as an advisor but as the new director of product development, a position she had created specifically for him. "We need diverse perspectives," Victoria announced to the team. "Mike has taught me that value isn't found in degrees or titles, but in experience, knowledge, and the ability to connect human needs with technological solutions." Emily, invited to the celebration, shyly presented Victoria with a new drawing. This time depicting 3 figures: Emily, Mike, and Victoria standing under a rainbow. The child had captured Victoria's straight posture and dark hair with remarkable accuracy, though she had added a smile wider than any Victoria had worn in years. "That's us," Emily explained unnecessarily. "Dad says rainbows come after storms, and I thought maybe your storm is over now too." Victoria's eyes misted unexpectedly as she accepted the artwork, her usual composure momentarily slipping. For a woman who had trained herself to project nothing but confidence and control, the sudden emotion was disorienting. She knelt to Emily's level, something she would never have done weeks ago. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "I think you're right about the storms." Over the child's shoulder, she caught Mike watching them, his expression a complex mixture of pride and something else. Something that made her pulse quicken, in a way no business victory ever had. Later, as Victoria drove Mike and Emily home, the little girl fell asleep in the back seat, leaving the adults to talk quietly about the future. The city lights streaked past the windows of Victoria's luxury sedan, creating a cocoon of intimacy within the vehicle. "The new position will change your life," Victoria observed, glancing sideways at Mike's profile. He looked tired, but content, the weight of years of financial struggle beginning to lift from his shoulders. "I just hope I can balance it with being a father," Mike replied, his voice low to avoid waking Emily. "She's been through so much already." "Emily comes first, always." Victoria glanced in the rearview mirror at the sleeping child, her face peaceful in the glow of passing streetlights. "I think that's what I admire most about you, Mike. You've never lost sight of what truly matters, regardless of circumstances." The simple truth of this observation surprised her. In her world of ambitious executives constantly climbing over each other for advancement, Mike's unwavering priorities were rare and precious. "I just hope I can balance it with being a father," Mike replied. "Emily comes first, always." Victoria glanced in the rearview mirror at the sleeping child. "I think that's what I admire most about you, Mike. You've never lost sight of what truly matters, regardless of circumstances." Arriving at his apartment, Mike lifted his sleeping daughter from the car. As he turned to thank Victoria, their hands touched briefly. "I never properly thanked you for saving my company, did I?" she said softly. Mike smiled. "And I never thanked you for seeing value in a janitor." Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, an unspoken connection forming between them that neither was ready to name. 3 weeks later, disaster struck when Victoria was involved in a serious car accident returning from a late meeting. The impact left her in a coma, her brain showing minimal activity despite her body remaining largely uninjured. The FutureTech board immediately began contingency planning, while doctors offered guarded prognoses. Mike, now part of the executive team, visited her hospital room daily, bringing fresh flowers and quietly updating her on company developments as if she could hear. One night, when childcare fell through, Mike was forced to bring Emily to the hospital during his visit. The little girl studied the unconscious woman with solemn curiosity. "Is she sleeping?" she whispered. "Her brain is resting," Mike explained gently. "The doctors hope she'll wake up soon." Emily considered this, then climbed onto a chair beside Victoria's bed. "Maybe she's lonely in there," she suggested. "When I'm sick, you sing to me. Can I sing to her?" Before Mike could object, Emily began singing "You Are My Sunshine," the same lullaby Victoria had sung to her during her fever. Mike started to stop her, concerned about hospital rules, but then noticed something extraordinary on the monitors. Victoria's brain activity increased slightly during the song. Over the next weeks, Mike arranged for Emily to visit regularly, always bringing her guitar for what they called music medicine. Hospital staff made exceptions to visitation rules when they observed the positive changes in Victoria's neural responses during these sessions. Emily would sing, then tell Victoria stories about school or describe new shells added to her collection. One evening, as Emily sang, Victoria's fingers twitched. By the following week, she squeezed Mike's hand in response to questions. The doctors were amazed by her rapid improvement, unable to explain the connection between the music and her recovery. 39 days after the accident, while Emily was singing a particularly heartfelt rendition of Over the Rainbow, Victoria's eyes fluttered open. Her first words, barely audible, were, "Keep singing, sweetheart." When she was strong enough for longer conversations, Victoria confessed that while in the coma, she had been aware of the singing, a golden thread she had followed back to consciousness. "Your voice gave me something to hold onto in the darkness," she told Emily, who beamed with importance. During her recovery, Victoria made a surprising discovery. While reviewing company operations she had missed, she learned that Mike had not only maintained her vision but expanded it, developing a new line of pediatric monitoring devices inspired by his observations of hospital equipment used on children. "Kids aren't just small adults," he explained when she questioned him. "They interact with technology differently, and most medical devices aren't designed with their needs in mind." The prototypes he showed her were ingenious, colorful, less intimidating, but sophisticated enough to provide critical data. Victoria watched him explain the child-friendly interfaces with animation lighting his face, and realized something had fundamentally changed within her. The woman who had once valued achievement above all else now found herself valuing connection more. Connection to this man who had seen her worth when she was invisible, and to the little girl who had sung her back to life. 6 months after the accident, FutureTech launched its pediatric line to widespread acclaim. At the celebration, Victoria stood slightly apart, watching Mike interact with investors with the same authentic warmth he showed everyone. Emily, now 8, twirled in a new dress nearby, occasionally running to her father or to Victoria with observations or questions. Victoria's assistant approached with a reminder about an upcoming meeting, but Victoria shook her head. "It can wait," she said, a response that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Later that evening, Mike found Victoria on the office balcony, looking out at the city lights. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, standing beside her. Victoria smiled. "I was just thinking about invisibility." At his questioning look, she continued, "Before the accident, before you and Emily, I was surrounded by people but completely alone. Successful but invisible, in all the ways that mattered." Mike's hand found hers on the railing, their fingers intertwining naturally. "We see you," he said simply. Victoria turned to face him, the walls she had built over a lifetime, finally crumbling. "And I see you, Mike Wilson. I always will." No declarations were needed, no promises spoken aloud. Their journey from invisibility to recognition had forged something rare and precious between them, a connection built on seeing the true worth in each other when the rest of the world had looked past them. As Emily joined them on the balcony, slipping her small hand into Victoria's free one, the three stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city below and the stars above, no longer strangers, no longer alone, but a family created not by blood but by the simple miracle of truly being seen.